Naomi Parish raised her hand in a conference room full of architects, project directors, and the man whose name was on the company letterhead, and she was wearing her front desk lanyard when she did it. The room went silent for 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but something worse. The laugh of a room that finds something so obviously impossible it becomes briefly amusing. No malice. Just the casual certainty of people who have never been wrong about this kind of thing. It had started, like most Tuesdays, with coffee orders no one had canceled. Naomi arrived at Meridian Development Group at 7:45, 45 minutes before anyone else, reorganized the visitor chairs without being asked, and noticed the lobby ficus was overwatered again. She knew that building the way she knew her own kitchen, which floor's copy machine jammed on Thursdays, which senior director always left his badge in his car, which out-of-town client needed the single-stall bathroom pointed out, or they'd spend 8 minutes lost near the server room. She had been the front desk coordinator at Meridian for 4 years. She knew everything. She was not invisible because she lacked intelligence. She was invisible because no one had decided to look. Harold Bell walked into the all-staff meeting at 9:10, moving with the measured pace of a man who understood that rooms waited for him. He was 71 years old, had built Meridian from a 2-person consulting firm into the most prominent development group in Nashville, and had the bearing of someone who had already made the decision he was about to announce. He stood at the head of the table, placed both hands flat on its surface, and said without ceremony, "I'm retiring at the end of the quarter." No one looked surprised. Several people looked pleased in the careful, controlled way of people calculating what comes next. "There will be no appointment," Harold continued. "Whoever leads this company forward will earn it. I'm opening an internal competition for the managing director position. The project is the Cumberland Initiative, $280 million in community development funding. Whoever presents the strongest proposal wins the contract and the title. The Cumberland Valley Community Board decides. I sign." That was when Dex Whitfield made the mistake of his life. He stood, buttoned his jacket, a navy blazer worn with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades deciding what authority was supposed to look like, and said in the generous tone of someone who has already won, "I think that's exactly right. And to show that this company values talent at every level, I move that any Meridian employee can enter, no restrictions. May the best proposal win." It was a statement designed to appear inclusive and mean absolutely nothing. Dex knew exactly who had a real shot. He had simply failed to account for Naomi. Her hand went up before she had consciously decided to raise it. Right hand, still slightly ink-stained from addressing client folders that morning, lifted with the easy confidence of someone who used to sit in the front row of her urban planning courses at Tennessee State before she had to stop going. "I'd like to enter," she said. The room turned to her as one unit. The lanyard was visible. Her desk was 14 steps from the door. The laughter lasted about 4 seconds. Harold Bell did not laugh. He studied her for 2 full seconds with the expression of a man reading a document in a language he hasn't spoken in years but hasn't forgotten. Then he said, "All submissions by Friday 5 o'clock," and adjourned the meeting. Naomi walked back to her desk, adjusted the visitor sign-in sheet, and did not let herself breathe until she was alone. She submitted her application at 4:58 on Friday afternoon. Paul, the HR coordinator, looked at the form twice. Looked at her, looked at the form again. "Everything seems to be in order," he said slowly, in the tone of someone who was already mentally drafting a text to his coworkers. By Monday morning, she figured at least 40 people knew. She found out the usual way, being present where she wasn't expected. 2 project directors walked through the lobby without glancing at the front desk. "Did you see the full submission list? Dex is furious. He should be angry at himself. He's the one who opened it up." They pushed through the door laughing. Naomi entered 2 names in the small spiral planner she kept under the front desk, color-coded by category. She capped her pen. She went back to rerouting a FedEx delivery to the 3rd floor. She met Liam Sato that same afternoon. She was carrying a box of proposal reference materials from the print shop on 5th, too large for the sidewalk, too awkward for the pace she was trying to keep, when the curb came up sooner than it should have and the box went sideways and the folders made a semicircle across the pavement in the specific, humiliating arc of things that were fine until they weren't. He was already crouching when she got to her knees, gathering folders with the practical efficiency of someone used to finding the fastest solution. "Thank you," she said, taking a stack without looking at him directly. "Sorry about the performance." I counted 6 witnesses, he said. 2 of them were pigeons, so it doesn't really count. She looked at him then. Early 30s, work boots, a rolled set of blueprints under his arm, the slight squint of someone who'd been in the sun all morning. He seemed genuinely amused, not at her expense but alongside her, which was a different thing entirely. "Congratulations," she said. "You've just met the most disorganized woman in Nashville." He considered this with appropriate seriousness. "I'm a structural engineer. I've watched load-bearing walls fail during presentations. The competition is steep." She laughed. "A real one, the kind that comes out when a person is balanced exactly on the border between a very bad day and something else wins by half a step." They stayed on the sidewalk for half an hour. She talked about the day without naming the company, the position, or any of the specifics that would make it complicated. He listened without trying to fix anything before she finished. At some point he said, without any sign of having rehearsed it, "The most useful people I've ever worked with never had the most impressive titles." She didn't answer right away. She thought about it later, walking back, the folders finally in order under her arm. She didn't know his name yet. He didn't know hers. The morning meeting started by accident. He was at the coffee shop on Commerce Street the next day. A corner place, narrow and warm, holding a cup with both hands and looking entirely at ease with his choice to be there. She got her order. She sat at the next table over, not his. "You survived," he said. "The day or the sidewalk. Yesterday felt like it could go either way." His name was Liam. He had his own small structural firm, 3 employees, contracts mainly with independent developers. His father, he mentioned once, wanted him to go into finance. He hadn't. He said it the way someone says something that's been fully settled internally and is simply being shared as a fact. She told him she worked at a development company, front desk, going on 4 years. He nodded without pausing, no shift in expression, no readjustment. "I know the building better than anyone who has an office in it," she said, testing him. "Every contractor complaint, every client preference, every decision that looks smart from the executive floor and lands badly on the ground." "That's a real skill," Liam said. "It's an ignored skill, not the same thing." He was quiet for a second. "No," he agreed, "it really isn't." The coffee went cold while they weren't paying attention to it. Neither of them mentioned it. 3 weeks into the competition period, Naomi arrived early to clean the conference room before a candidate alignment meeting and, through the specific grace of a meeting that ran long and a cleaning schedule that never adjusted, stayed. She pushed the cart to the wall. No one asked her to leave. No one noticed she was there. She had learned, in 4 years at Meridian, that those 2 things together functioned like an invisible chair with her name on it. Dex presented first, premium repositioning, the Cumberland district rebranded as an aspirational destination, upscale residential, boutique commercial, rooftop amenities, lifestyle branding. People nodded. Naomi looked out the window. Then Tricia Dunbar, Dex's closest ally and everyone's understood strategic consultant in this process, began laying out the demographic rationale. The Cumberland Valley Community Board represents over 600 households in the greater metro area, she said, with the confidence of someone who has memorized their own argument and mistakes that for understanding it. "Our target market is the emerging professional class, 25 to 45, income above the metro median. Aspirational development speaks directly to that growth sector." A general quiet of approval. Naomi raised her hand. The quality of the silence changed. "Just a question," Naomi said. "Of those 600 households, what percentage are currently owner-occupied, and what does the Cumberland Board's own survey data say about their residents' housing priorities?" Tricia opened her mouth. "The board released a community needs assessment in February," Naomi continued calmly, "the way someone confirms information they already hold. It was sent to the Meridian Partnership inbox. It sat in the shared documents folder for 11 days before anyone archived it. I read it while organizing the quarterly filings." She paused. 63% of Cumberland residents listed housing affordability as their primary concern. 17% listed green infrastructure. 11% listed business development for existing community members. She looked at the proposal slide on the screen. Aspirational repositioning doesn't speak to any of those 3. The silence that followed was a different kind. Someone in the back said, "Do you have the document?" "I can pull the filing reference in about 4 minutes if you'd like." Dex was looking at his own papers. Tricia's expression held the specific composure of someone reorganizing information at high speed. Thank you for that, Tricia said with the precise smile of someone storing something away. We'll take it under advisement. Naomi picked up her cart and left. Earl Odom was leaning against the hallway wall when she came out. 62 years old, head of facilities, 26 years at Meridian, the kind of stillness that comes from knowing exactly which problems are actually problems. He had worked alongside her father once. Naomi didn't know that yet. Heard you were in there, he said. I was cleaning the room. And stayed. Forgot to leave. He looked at her for a moment. Your father used to say the most useful thing you can do in a meeting where no one expects you is to listen until you have exactly one thing worth saying. Then say it. Naomi went still. It was the first time anyone in that building had mentioned her father in over a year. I'm not saying anything, Earl said, raising both hands. Just saying I've got an office in the basement and I'm usually there by 6:30, if someone needed another set of eyes on anything. He walked away without waiting for a response. That night she sat on a bench near the pedestrian bridge and told Liam the outline of it. Not the company, not the names, just the shape. The meeting no one had invited her to. The numbers she'd read from a document everyone else had archived. The moment the room stopped reacting the way it usually reacted to her. You cited a community survey from memory, Liam said. I read it, I remember things I read. Naomi, you disrupted a senior director's pitch using data that only you had taken the time to find. It was in the shared folder, which no one else opened. He looked at her. Do you understand what you did in there? She looked at the river. They won't see it that way. Some already are. You said someone in the back asked for the document. One person. Last week it was 0. He leaned back on the bench. That's progress. You're an optimist. I'm an engineer. I have to be. Structures don't build themselves by assuming everything will fail. She shook her head. He laughed. And somehow she laughed too, which had been happening more than she'd accounted for, and she had stopped being surprised by it. The next morning, Naomi went down to the basement. Earl had 2 coffees and an old folder on the table, weathered with the original Meridian logo from at least 15 years back. He opened it and turned it toward her. Every anonymous improvement memo she had ever submitted through the Staff Suggest portal was inside. All 11 of them across 4 years. The submission field was blank, as always. But the handwriting in the margin on the first page, small, organized, with her specific habit of underlining numbers rather than circling them, was unmistakably hers. She looked up. Earl was drinking his coffee. How long have you had these? She asked. Long enough, he said. 3 weeks before the final presentation, Naomi arrived to find that 41 of her 57 research files had been deleted from the candidate shared drive. The remaining 16 were the least significant. Background articles, general zoning maps, formatting templates, everything specific, everything field-sourced was gone. Earl had the access logs within an hour. Tricia Dunbar's credentials, 10:47 p.m. 2 nights prior. And 14 transferred, Earl said, setting the printout on the table. 2 Dex Whitfield's personal project folder. She folded the paper and placed it in the red section of her planner. She picked up her cart. You're not going to HR? Earl asked. Not yet. My word against theirs right now. I need more. She reorganized her entire cleaning route. Dex's office was on the 7th floor. She arrived at 7:55, exactly when Dex left for the break room and exactly when his office for 11 minutes. She went in with the cart, started from the far corner, and paid attention. She wasn't looking for anything to take. She was looking for something to understand. A physical planner, open to the following week. Thursday noon. External. Hartwick, confirmed direction. She found out who Carl Hartwick was within 40 minutes. Deputy Liaison to the Cumberland Valley Community Board. Dex had scheduled a private meeting with the client's team before the final presentation. She put the date in the red section in smaller handwriting than usual. That night Liam texted first, "Bridge or coffee?" She stared at the message, then typed back, "Walk." They walked the length of 2nd Avenue in the dark. She told him the outline, not the names, not the specifics. Someone had taken weeks of her work, repackaged it, and was planning to present it privately to the most important people in the process before she ever had a chance to stand in the same room. Proving it is almost impossible, she said. Almost, Liam said. She looked at him. You said almost impossible, not impossible. The difference is significant, he said. You have the access logs, you have the original dates, you have your field notes and your contact records. He stopped walking. She stopped too. He took your files. He cannot take the people who spoke to you. Those people still exist. They still remember talking to you, not to him. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment. That's obvious, he said. I know, you were going to say it first. She wasn't, but she didn't correct him. I was close to stopping today, she said, this afternoon. He looked at her steadily. I know. You showed up without your planner. She checked her bag. It was true. For the first time in weeks, she had left the building without the spiral planner. That's concerning, she said. A little bit, yes. She pulled out her phone and made 3 notes: community liaisons, original contact logs, field visit dates, 3 people who had spoken with her, not with Dex, not with Tricia, and who could confirm it in writing. She slept better that night than she had any right to. 2 days before the final presentation, an anonymous text arrived at 7 in the morning from a number she didn't recognize. He's meeting with Hartwick again tomorrow. Wednesday noon. Old City Grill on 3rd. He's going to present your research as his own, in person, with no record you exist. She was at the Old City Grill at 11:54, wearing the gray blazer she kept for client days. She had taken a personal day for the first time in 14 months, using hours she'd accumulated and never touched. Her supervisor approved it by text without looking up. Invisibility, she had learned, was sometimes a tool. The private dining room had frosted glass. She could see 4 silhouettes inside. She went to the host stand and said, in the specific tone of someone resolving a minor scheduling conflict, that she was the research associate for the Meridian team and needed to deliver a correction to the briefing documents. She was shown in immediately. Dex saw her first. His expression moved through 3 phases in under a second: surprise, recalculation, controlled fury, before he landed on the tone of someone trying to close a door that has already been opened in front of witnesses. Good afternoon, Naomi said to the full table. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Naomi Parish. I'm with Meridian Development Group. Philip Okafor, the board's project liaison, 50-ish, gray at the temples, looked at her with the patience of a man who had learned that the most useful information usually comes from unexpected directions. What's your role there? Front desk coordinator, she said it clearly. She did not soften it. Carl Hartwick glanced at Dex. She isn't part of the project team, Tricia said from the far seat, in the smooth voice of someone who has practiced composure as a professional skill. The research you've been presented with today is, Naomi said. She opened her planner to the red section and placed it on the table. The community needs data, the liaison interview summaries, the owner occupancy breakdowns. All of it originates from my field research. I have the dated emails, the original contact logs, and written confirmation from 3 of the 4 community representatives whose input is reflected in this proposal. None of them have spoken to Mr. Whitfield. The table went very quiet. Philip Okafor set his coffee down. Do you have documentation with you? She pulled up the emails on her phone and offered it to him. He scrolled. He did not hurry. Dex said nothing. Tricia looked at a point on the wall slightly above everyone's head. Mr. Whitfield, Philip said, still looking at the phone. This is a misunderstanding about internal research protocols. Please sit down. Dex sat down. Naomi spent the next 12 minutes presenting the outline of her proposal. Not everything. The full presentation was in 2 days, but enough. Enough for Philip Okafor to ask 4 questions, all answered without hesitation. Enough for Carl Hartwick to write something in his notebook and not share it with anyone at the table. When she finished, Philip looked at his colleague. Then he looked at Naomi. We'll see you at the formal presentation on Friday, he said. She left. She stood on 3rd Avenue in the November air and breathed. Her phone buzzed. Liam, how did it go? She typed, the client took down my contact information. His reply took 40 seconds. Then I need you to know I'm trying very hard not to make this into a big deal out loud, but internally it is a very big deal. She walked back toward the office, smiling in a way she hadn't planned for. She was cleaning the 8th floor corridor that afternoon when she heard quick footsteps behind her. Dex Whitfield, tie slightly loosened, the look of a man who has been swallowing something for hours that hasn't gone down. You walked into a private client meeting without authorization, he said. That's a terminable offense. Presenting someone else's research as your own generally is too, Naomi said. She turned to face him fully, cleaning cloth in hand, feet steady. Mr. Whitfield, I have spent 4 years building being treated like part of the furniture. I watched every meeting from the corner, and I learned more about this company's real problems than anyone who has had a seat at the table. The only thing you have that I don't, and the title is currently up for grabs." He stood there for 3 seconds, then he left. She wrote his name in the red section of her planner, then moved it deliberately to the top of the page. The final presentation was held in Meridian's main event room on a Friday morning. 43 people attended. Philip Okafor and Carl Hartwick sat in the second row. Harold Bell sat center front with the posture of a man making his last major decision and fully aware of that fact. Naomi arrived early and set up her own materials. The other candidates had assistants for that. She had her planner and 4 years of everything no one had bothered to catalog. Dex presented third. He walked to the front with the ease of someone who had rehearsed for days to look like he hadn't. Every number she had spent weeks collecting was familiar because it was hers, reorganized into his sentences, delivered with his certainty. Word for word. The room applauded with appropriate warmth. Philip Okafor did not applaud. He looked at his notes. Then it was Naomi's turn. She walked to the front without a folder, without a slide deck, without anything but the planner and 4 years lived from the lobby out. She stood at the center and looked at the room for 2 full seconds. By choice, not from nerves. "I'll start with a question," she said. "Mr. Whitfield, can you name the president of the East Side Neighborhood Coalition? They're one of the 4 community groups whose input shapes the Cumberland Board's decision criteria." Dex looked at her from the candidates' row. "You don't have to answer now," she said. "Her name is Beverly Ames. She's held that position for 9 years. She meets with community members every Saturday morning at the diner on Gallatin Pike because that's where people actually show up. She opened the planner. I spoke with Beverly in September. I have her email, the date, and a written statement confirming that no other Meridian representative has ever contacted her." She looked up at the room. "I have the same documentation for the other 3 liaisons." The room was very still. "I don't have a consulting budget," she continued. "I don't have a team or a corner office or a title that takes up more than 1 line. What I have is 4 years inside every hallway and client visit and misdirected complaint that passed through this company's front door. And all of it," she touched the planner, "is right here." She presented for 14 minutes. She spoke about Cumberland as a community that wanted investment that understood them. Not a luxury repositioning, not an aspirational rebrand, but development that held space for the people already living there. She spoke about the agricultural history of the Cumberland Hills and what a company that actually knows its community can build, that a company that only imagines its community cannot. Her final sentence was this: "A development group that listens to the people it serves will always last longer than one that only imagines who they are." For one breath, the room held completely still. Then Philip Okafor stood up alone and began to applaud. The room followed. It was the kind of applause that begins in 3 places at once and cannot be politely contained. That was when Dex stood. "This presentation contains unauthorized use of proprietary research, and I demand—" "Mr. Whitfield," Harold Bell's voice was quiet. The room went quieter. "Sit down." Dex stood there. "Sit down," Harold repeated in exactly the same tone. Dex sat. And then Liam, who had been standing against the far wall since the event began, which Naomi had noticed when she walked in, though neither of them acknowledged it, stepped forward toward Philip Okafor and said, in a completely ordinary voice that carried in the silence, "I met this woman on a sidewalk about 6 weeks ago. She'd dropped a box of files and ended up on her knees on the pavement with the expression of someone having the worst day of the year who was not going to let it be the worst day of the year." He looked at Naomi at the front of the room. "I talked to her for weeks without knowing where she worked or what she was trying to do. And everything she told me was exactly what you just saw." Philip looked at him. "You know her." "I do," Liam said. "She never asked me for anything. She never used a single thing. She just worked." The room was still. It was Tricia Dunbar who broke it, not with words but by standing quietly, pushing in her chair and moving toward the exit with the practiced composure of someone who has assessed a situation and chosen the fastest available route. Earl Odom was at the door with a manila folder. "Mrs. Dunbar," Earl said pleasantly, "legal's going to want a word first." Tricia stopped. Harold Bell rose. He looked at Dex, sitting in his chair with the expression of a man reviewing every decision he'd made in the past 2 months. He looked at Tricia, motionless at the door. He looked at Philip Okafor, arms crossed, with the expression of a man who had come for a presentation and ended up watching something considerably more useful. Then he looked at Naomi, still at the front of the room, the planner in her hand, the same steady expression she had carried since the morning she raised her hand in this building. "The next managing director of Meridian Development Group," Harold said to the entire room, in the voice of someone not announcing a decision but confirming something that had already been true for some time, "is Naomi Parish." The applause that followed was not polite and could not be stopped. Naomi stood at the front and didn't move for a moment. She looked at Earl, who was at the door with his folder, and a very small, very complete smile. She looked at Philip Okafor, who nodded once. She looked at Harold, who had already sat back down with the serene expression of someone who has just resolved the most important problem of a 40-year career. She looked at Liam. He was looking back at her with the expression she had never quite been able to name. Now she could. It was the pride of someone who witnesses something true and doesn't need to own any part of it. She stepped off the stage. She opened the planner to the red section and wrote one name at the top in a clean, unhurried hand, Dex Whitfield. Then she closed it and walked toward Liam. Before she reached him, Harold Bell was at her shoulder. "My office," he said quietly. "There's something I should have shown you a year ago." Harold's office had a window that overlooked the Cumberland Hills in the distance. Naomi had cleaned that window 37 times. She knew exactly which corner fogged in winter. It was the first time she had ever sat on the other side of his desk. He placed a folder in front of her. Thin, old, the kind that holds a few pages that have been waiting longer than they should. Inside, printed copies of every anonymous staff suggestion she had ever submitted through the employee portal, beginning 4 years ago. And behind them, a photograph, a city planning committee meeting from over 20 years ago, with a younger Harold Bell on one side and, 3 chairs down, a man whose posture she recognized before she recognized his face. Her father. "He was the best land-use planner I ever worked with," Harold said. "He left Meridian to take a city position when you were about 3. He used to say the biggest waste in development was ignoring the people who knew the building's real story, not the blueprints, the actual story." Naomi looked at the photograph for a long time. "The first anonymous memo you submitted," Harold said, "I knew it was yours by the 3rd paragraph, the handwriting on the routing slip." He underlined numbers the same way. "You knew," she said, "since memo number 2. And you never said anything. Because I needed it to be yours, not his legacy, not my recognition. Yours completely because you earned it." He folded his hands. "Dex gave me the opening, you did the rest." She sat with that for a moment. Then she opened the planner to the last page. She wrote Harold Bell, not a wrong prediction, a very long answer. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He looked out toward the hills. "Your father would have been standing at that door this morning," he said, in his good coat, making sure he got there early enough to get a seat. Dex Whitfield's termination was processed by end of day. Tricia Dunbar spent 3 hours with the legal department and left the building in the particular silence of someone recalculating costs they hadn't anticipated. Earl stood in the lobby and watched both of them go, coffee in hand, with the quiet satisfaction of a man closing a chapter he had been patient about for a very long time. Naomi found Liam on the bench near the pedestrian bridge that evening. She sat down. The space between them was the old space. Not the careful distance of recent weeks, just the ordinary space of 2 people who have gotten used to each other. "There's something I should have told you sooner," he said. "My father is on the Cumberland Valley Community Board, not Philip, one of the other members. I found out last week which project this competition was attached to, and I didn't know how to." "Did you know when we met?" "No." "Did you know at the coffee shop?" "No." She looked at the river. "I believe you," she said. And she did completely, without needing to examine it. "It changes things," he said. "It changes how it looks. That's not the same as changing what it is." He was quiet for a moment. She opened the planner to the last page and turned it toward him. His name was there, written weeks ago, the night she'd walked home from the river and couldn't explain what she was feeling. She had never crossed it out. It was written in blue ink, the only entry on that page written in blue. "You're the only one," she said. "I wrote in blue." Liam looked at the page. Then he looked at her, the bench, the river, the Nashville skyline behind it. None of it was especially dramatic, no convenient weather, no cinematic lighting. Just the 2 of them and the steady hum of a city that had been going about its business throughout all of it. He reached over and held her hand. She held his back. In her first month as managing director, Naomi implemented 3 changes. The first was operational, a revised vendor review process in the previous 2 years. The second was structural, a formal community liaison protocol for every project over $50 million, requiring on-site engagement with existing residents before any proposal phase began. The third was a scholarship program for Meridian employees and their dependents who had left higher education for circumstances outside their control, financial, medical, family. A full scholarship to return with partial paid leave to complete coursework. The application included one required short answer question she wrote herself. Describe the moment you had to choose between your future and your responsibilities. She knew what that moment felt like. She knew it didn't mean the future was gone. It meant it was waiting, in the places where no one thought to look. Earl found out about the program through the company-wide email. He read it twice. He sat in the basement for a full minute without moving. Then he picked up his phone and sent a message to Naomi's new email address, the one with managing director in the signature. Your father would have written the same question. She read it at her desk, at the window she had cleaned 37 times, overlooking the hills that had always been there. She wrote back, I know, I learned it from him, and from you. Then she turned back to the window, to the city full of people whose names no one had thought to write down, and she got back to work.